The story begins in the quiet town of Brightburn, Kansas, where Kyle and Tori Breyer are relaxing in bed. Suddenly, the peaceful night is interrupted by a low rumble. Tori pauses, sensing something strange. Moments later, a powerful crash shakes their entire house. Startled, they rush to the window, and what they see leaves them stunned. A glowing red light shining brightly in the woods nearby. Curious and concerned, the couple heads toward the mysterious crash site. They find a spaceship, and inside it, a baby boy. They decide to keep the child and raise him as their own. They name him Brandon, and from that night on, their lives are never the same. 10 years later, Tori heads to Brandon's room in the morning to get him ready for school, but finds the room empty. Since hide-and-seek is a game they often play, she assumes he's hiding nearby and whistles to signal him. A distant whistle answers back, giving her a hint of his location. Following the sound, she makes her way to the family barn. Inside, she looks around carefully, checking behind hay bales and around corners. The barn is quiet, and for a moment, she doesn't see anything. Suddenly, Brandon jumps out from his hiding spot, surprising her. She reacts with a mix of amusement and relief. They step outside together, where Kyle is waiting. He gently reminds Brandon about staying out of the barn, as it can be dangerous. At school, Brandon is called on during class to answer a question about bees and wasps. He responds confidently, explaining that bees help with pollination while wasps are predators. He even shares a detailed example of a specific wasp species, Polistes solcifer, which no longer builds its own nests and instead relies on other species to raise its young. While his answer is accurate, his classmates find it unusual. One boy, Royce, teases him for going into too much detail, and most of the class joins in laughing, except for Caitlin, a kind classmate. She tries to reassure Brandon, and the two exchange a brief, understanding smile. Later that night, at home, Tori checks on Brandon before heading to her painting room. As she begins to paint, a faint red light pulses from the barn. At the same time, Brandon starts having seizures in his room, his body shaking on the bed. Tori hears a noise but doesn't realize what's happening and eventually returns to her painting when things quiet down. A short while later, Brandon wakes up and climbs out through his window. Tori hears a loud thud outside and steps out to investigate. Everything seems normal at first, but then she senses something behind her. As she turns, a figure rushes past her, and she quickly runs through the backyard. While moving through the laundry hanging outside, she catches a brief glimpse of Brandon's back before he disappears into the darkness. Tori notices the barn glowing faintly in the distance and decides to check if Brandon might be there. Inside, she finds him standing over the trap doors, repeating strange words under his breath. He's focused and agitated, tugging at the chains that keep the doors locked as if something is calling to him from below. Tori calls his name a few times, but he doesn't seem to hear her. When she gently reaches out, he finally reacts, startled and confused, as if waking from a trance. She assumes he's sleepwalking and calmly guides him away, trying not to alarm him. Brandon mentions hearing voices, but Tori brushes it off, not wanting him to feel scared or different. She takes him back to his room and helps him settle into bed. Later, Kyle comes by to check on them. Tori keeps the details to herself and tells him that Brandon had just wandered downstairs in his sleep. She chooses not to mention the barn or what she saw there. The next day, Kyle opens up to Brandon about how challenging it was in the beginning when they first adopted him. He admits he didn't immediately know how to connect, but one moment stood out, when he used a piece of candy to calm baby Brandon. From that day on, he felt a strong bond, and the candy became a special memory between them. As they sit together, the two quietly enjoy the same candy, sharing a rare moment of closeness. After a while, Kyle heads off to do some yard work, leaving Brandon to himself. Brandon tries to start the lawnmower, but it doesn't work right away. His frustration quickly grows until, without fully realizing it, he tosses the heavy machine across the yard with surprising force. Stunned, he looks at his hands, slowly beginning to understand the strength he holds. He approaches the mower, now flipped upside down with its sharp blades spinning. As he stares, strange whispers echo in his mind, pulling him into a trance-like state. Guided by the voices, he slams his hand down into the spinning blades. The machine breaks instantly, but his hand is completely unharmed. It becomes clear that something unusual, and possibly dangerous, is awakening inside him. For Brandon's 12th birthday, the family gathers at a local diner to celebrate. Tori's sister, Marilee, and her husband, Noah, join them. Marilee, who also happens to be Brandon's school counselor, praises his intelligence and academic talent. As a birthday gift, Noah presents Brandon with a hunting rifle, thinking it would be a fun and traditional gesture. However, Kyle quickly steps in and takes the gun away, reminding everyone that Brandon is still too young for it. Brandon becomes upset and insists on keeping it, but Kyle stays firm. Frustrated, Brandon slams his fist on the table. Suddenly, the screens at the nearby arcade flicker, drawing attention from others in the diner. The moment becomes tense, and Kyle decides it's best to end the celebration early. When Brandon doesn't get up right away, Kyle grabs his arm and once again, the arcade screens flicker oddly. Tori steps in to calm things down and gently persuades Brandon to leave. As the family walks out, a waitress named Erica watches them closely, clearly unsettled by what just happened. Back at home, Kyle and Tori sit down to talk about Brandon's recent behavior. Tori tries to stay positive, pointing out that they were no angels during their own teenage years. She shares how her own parents were distant, and she's determined to be more supportive with Brandon. Kyle agrees and suggests they all go camping in Drivewood the next day to unwind and spend time together. The next morning, as they prepare, Tori reminds Brandon to grab his jacket, but he doesn't respond. Instead, he stays focused on eating breakfast. Kyle comes over and notices something strange. Brandon is absent-mindedly chewing on his metal fork. Kyle quickly takes it away, and Brandon snaps out of it, surprised to see the bent fork in his hand. Later, while packing, Tori goes into Brandon's room to find his jacket. While searching, she spots a bundle of papers hidden under his bed. Curious, she shows them to Kyle. At first, they find pictures of undressed women, and although they're a bit uncomfortable, they chalk it up to normal curiosity at his age. But as they continue flipping through, the mood changes. Mixed in with the other images are disturbing sketches and detailed drawings of human organs. Due to this, both parents grow uneasy and decide they need to have a serious talk with him soon. While out hunting, Kyle tries to talk to Brandon about growing up and relationships. He explains that intimacy isn't just physical, it's also about love and connection. He mentions that it's normal to have certain urges and that it's okay to explore them privately. Brandon misunderstands and thinks Kyle is talking about something else, making the conversation awkward. Realizing this, Kyle quickly changes the subject. Meanwhile, at Caitlin's house, she's suddenly woken by music playing from her laptop. She gets out of bed to close it, but when she returns, the music starts again. Feeling uneasy, she closes the laptop once more, noticing some notes left on it. Then, sensing someone outside her window, Caitlin turns to look and immediately calls her mother, Erica. Erica rushes into Caitlin's room, startling her. Caitlin points toward the window, frightened, saying someone is there, but Erica looks and doesn't see anyone outside. As she tries to calm Caitlin down, she learns that the person at the window was Brandon Breyer. Back at home, Tori is worried and searches the nearby woods for Brandon. Suddenly, he appears behind her, casually explaining he had just gone outside to use the bathroom. At school, Tori meets with Marilee to talk about Brandon's behavior at the diner. Marilee assures her that Brandon's mood swings are normal and just part of puberty, which gives Tori some relief. Later, Tori catches Brandon drawing strange symbols, but when she notices, he quickly hides his notebook. That night, Kyle hears the chickens making a commotion in the barn. Grabbing a gun, he goes to check, expecting to find a wolf or some wild animal. Instead, he finds Brandon standing silently among the panicked chickens, his gaze unsettling. Kyle tells Brandon it's late and it's time to go home, feeling uneasy as he leads him away. The next morning, Kyle discovers the chickens dead in their coop. He shows Tori and explains what he saw the night before. He argues that it couldn't have been a wolf because the coop's lock was still intact. Despite his concerns, Tori refuses to believe that Brandon could be responsible. At school, during a trust exercise, Brandon and his classmates form a circle. When it's Brandon's turn, Caitlin lets him fall to the ground, causing some of the other students to laugh. She calls him a pervert and initially refuses to help him up. Their coach steps in and warns Caitlin that she might fail the class if she doesn't cooperate. Feeling angry, Brandon grabs Caitlin's hand when she finally reaches out to help, but he squeezes too hard, crushing her hand. Caitlin screams in pain. Later, the parents of Brandon and Caitlin meet with the sheriff and the school principal to discuss what happened. Erica, Caitlin's mother, is furious and demands that Brandon be punished severely. She wants him locked up for what he did. However, when Erica learns that Brandon's punishment will only be suspension and counseling, she becomes even more upset. She questions if Brandon's real mother might be unstable or dangerous. Tori defends herself strongly, insisting she is Brandon's true mother and telling Erica that it's wrong to blame a child in this way. She apologizes sincerely for Caitlin's injury before leaving the meeting. As Tori and Kyle take Brandon away, Brandon casts a cold, menacing glance back at Erica. Back at home, Tori tells Kyle about the night when Brandon sleepwalked and tried to open the barn's trap door. Kyle expresses his concern about how drawn Brandon is to that place. He reminds Tori that Brandon isn't like other kids and he worries that Brandon might cause serious harm. That night, while lying in bed, Brandon suddenly understands the whispers he has been hearing. He leaves his room and walks out into the rain. heading toward the barn. Meanwhile, Tori is searching for answers about Brandon's origins. When she notices a red light glowing from the barn window, she rushes there. Inside, she finds Brandon floating above the red light. Panicked, she tries to catch him, but he falls and cuts his hand on the alien ship. Seeing Brandon hurt, Tori comforts him. Brandon asks her what he really is, and Tori decides to tell him the truth. She explains their struggle to have a baby and how he came from the alien ship. Brandon pulls away, upset and angry about being lied to. He runs outside and finally understands the whispers as the phrase, "Take the world." His eyes glow red as he screams. Brandon shows up uninvited in Caitlin's room. Caitlin feels scared, even though he tries to make up for it by giving her flowers. He tells her she doesn't need to be afraid because she's one of the few people who knows he's different. When Caitlin says her mother told her not to talk to him, Brandon warns that he will handle the situation himself. At the diner, Erica is cleaning up when she notices strange symbols drawn on the windows. Thinking it's just a prank, she calls for Gary. Suddenly the lights flicker wildly. Then the window breaks suddenly, and a sharp piece of glass hits Erica's eye. She struggles but manages to pull the shard out, with blood dripping onto the floor. Erica struggles to see clearly because of the blood in her eye. Feeling scared and threatened, she grabs a baseball bat and swings it around to try to scare off whoever is there. Then, she locks herself inside the freezer for safety. But suddenly, a hot, glowing laser cuts through the metal door, forcing it open. Erica looks up and sees a boy wearing a cape and mask, his eyes glowing bright red. Before she can react, he attacks and kills her. At breakfast, Tori and Kyle wait anxiously for Brandon, still unsettled by the events of the previous night. When Brandon arrives, they feel a sense of relief as he seems calmer and more accepting of what he is. Meanwhile, the sheriff investigates Erica's disappearance and, while at the diner, notices something unusual on the window. A strange symbol. He carefully examines it, realizing it might be important. At a counseling session, Marilee talks with Brandon about his adoption and learns that he has begun to see himself as superior, especially after discovering the truth about his origins. She presses him to express his feelings, especially about his lack of remorse over what happened to Caitlin. Marilee makes it clear that although she's family, she takes her role seriously and will be reporting to the sheriff. Brandon reacts with anger, visibly shaken. At a bar, Kyle talks with his friends about Erica's death. EJ hints that Brandon might be involved because of the earlier incident with Caitlin, but quickly apologizes after Kyle rebukes him. Kyle shares his growing fear that Brandon is turning into something dangerous. But Noah tries to ease the tension, reminding him that all children can act like monsters sometimes before he heads home. Later, Marilee is alone at home when Brandon shows up. He quietly threatens her to reconsider sending the sheriff his report, but Marilee remains firm and tells him to leave. Despite the menacing smile he gives her, he steps away. After closing the door, Marilee sends a text to Noah before going to bed, unaware that Brandon, wearing his red mask, watches from the shadows. He slips quietly into her room but stops when he hears Noah arriving home. Noah brushes his teeth in the bathroom, unaware of Brandon standing silently behind him. He senses movement near the closet and quickly turns on the light, startled to find Brandon in his mask. Noah scolds him and pulls him outside to his truck. Before entering, Brandon warns him not to tell his parents, but Noah isn't intimidated. As Noah gets into the driver's seat, the lights flicker. Not seeing Brandon inside, he steps out to find him and grabs him just as Brandon pulls on his mask. Suddenly, Noah is hit by a blast of laser vision. Brandon vanishes into the night, leaving Noah shaken. Limping back to the truck, Noah drives off. After some distance, Brandon slams into the truck, causing Noah to lose control. The vehicle breaks down, and Noah struggles to restart it. Flicking his headlights on and off, he catches sight of Brandon standing in front of the car. The lights flash again, revealing Brandon flying before he disappears. Anxious, Noah scans the area just in time to see Brandon lift the truck into the air and drop it forcefully. The crash throws Noah forward, breaking his jaw against the steering wheel. He loses consciousness as Brandon uses Noah's blood to draw a mysterious symbol on the road. Back at home, Kyle sits quietly while Tori makes a panicked call to Marilee. Brandon walks in, holding his shirt tightly in his hands as if hiding something. Tori quickly hugs him and asks what happened, but he lies, saying he's upset about a soccer game that led to bullying. Tori and Kyle both know Brandon isn't telling the truth when he quietly leaves for his room. They feel lost, unsure how to help their alien son since finding a specialist isn't easy. Kyle blames himself and Tori, thinking about how they raised Brandon even though he wasn't meant to be fully human. At night, Kyle dreams of the past. His mind takes him back to the woods where they first found Brandon. He sees Tori carrying a bleeding baby, and when she hands the child to him, Kyle's mind fills with the image of the monster Brandon could become. Suddenly, he jolts awake to Marilee's call. Together, Kyle and Tori rush to the hospital, where they find Marilee upset and worried about Noah's crash. They stay with her, offering comfort in the tense moment. At the hospital, Marilee shows worry about Brandon. Kyle and Tori feel shocked when she tells them that Brandon visited her before Noah's accident. The next morning, they try to talk to Brandon. They feel uneasy because he seems calm and doesn't show any sadness about Noah's death. Tori softly asks Brandon if he knows anything about what happened, but he lies and says no. Kyle loses his temper, angry and scared that their son might have done something terrible. When Kyle yells at him, Brandon pushes Kyle hard, making him crash into a cabinet. Tori quickly steps in to stop the fight and tells Brandon to go to his room. Later, Kyle thinks Brandon is hiding something. While Brandon takes a shower, Kyle looks through his room and finds a shirt stained with blood. He hides the shirt quickly and acts like he's sorry for what just happened. Back at home, Kyle shows Tori the evidence that proves Brandon's crime, but Tori doesn't want to believe it and chooses to ignore it. Kyle feels frustrated and hurt, and in a moment of anger, he tells her that Brandon isn't really their son. Tori gets upset by Kyle's harsh words and leaves the room. Meanwhile, the sheriff is at the site of Noah's accident. He notices the same strange symbol he found at Erica's case, making him more suspicious. Later, Kyle looks at Brandon's baby things and remembers how much he loves his son. Before going to bed, he tells Tori that he plans to take Brandon camping to fix their relationship and to show him love. Tori feels relieved and lets herself relax, leaning into Kyle's comforting arm. Back at home, Kyle and Brandon leave early in the morning. Their trip is quiet and tense, with no words between them. Meanwhile, the sheriff visits Tori and asks about Brandon. He shows her a photo of the strange symbol found at Noah's crash site. He says it looks like two letter B's combined and hints that it points to Brandon Breyer. Tori acts innocent, but the sheriff can tell she's hiding something. When she tells him to leave, he warns that he will be back. After the sheriff leaves, Tori rushes to Brandon's room. She finds his notebook filled with the same strange symbols. As she flips through the pages, she's shocked to see drawings showing how Erica and Noah died. Back in the woods, Kyle and Brandon walk quietly. Suddenly, Kyle raises his gun and aims at Brandon while he's distracted. A tear falls down Kyle's cheek because he doesn't want to do this, but he pulls the trigger and shoots Brandon in the head. To Kyle's shock, Brandon stands up like nothing happened and looks at him with surprise. Terrified, Kyle quickly reloads his gun, but Brandon disappears before he can shoot again. Kyle tries to run, but Brandon catches him fast. Kyle begs for his life, and for a moment, Brandon hesitates. Then, without warning, Brandon shoots powerful lasers through Kyle's head, killing him instantly. Tori desperately calls Kyle's phone, but Brandon answers instead. He coldly tells her Kyle is dead, but Tori refuses to believe it. She asks Brandon where he is, and he says he's at home. Then, he crushes Kyle's phone in his hand. Tori screams as Brandon begins tearing their house apart. She quickly calls 911, but Brandon interrupts her call before she can finish. The sheriff and his deputy rush to the Breyer home and find it in ruins. When Tori meets them, Brandon kills the sheriff in front of her. The deputy orders Tori to hide and calls for backup, but the radio has interference. As the deputy tries to report the situation, Brandon appears behind her. He violently slams her around the house until she falls, bleeding, right in front of where Tori is hiding under the bed. Brandon looks around, but doesn't find Tori anywhere. What he doesn't know is that she's already hanging outside the window, struggling to hold on. Suddenly, she slips and falls, hitting the ground hard. Her hand hurts badly, and that pain brings back a memory, the injury Brandon got before. With that memory fresh in her mind, Tori knows what she has to do. She scrambles up and runs toward the barn, Brandon right behind her. When she reaches the barn, she finds the trapdoor leading to the alien ship. As soon as she opens it, the ship begins to glow with an eerie, otherworldly light. The light reveals something horrifying, Erica's dissected body lying right behind Tori. Shocked and heartbroken, Tori's eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't hesitate. She grabs a sharp piece of metal from the ship, slips it into her back pocket, and steels herself for what's coming next. Tori calls out to Brandon, using soft whistles, just like when they used to play together. She wants to reach the good part of him still inside. Slowly, she moves closer, hoping he will remember who he once was. For a moment, Brandon seems to soften and melts into her arms. But then, with a heavy heart, Tori raises her arm, holding the sharp metal shard, ready to stop her son before he can do more harm. Brandon feels the deep sting of her betrayal. Anger explodes inside him and he shouts with rage. Before Tori can react, he grabs her tightly and smashes through the barn's roof. Tori's head hits the wood hard, bleeding from the impact. They fly higher and higher into the sky. With a gentle touch, she reaches up and caresses her son's face, trying to find a last connection. Then, without warning, Brandon lets her go. Tori falls, plunging down to her death below. After Brandon watches Tori fall, he looks up just in time to see a plane rushing toward him. The next morning, news breaks that the airplane crashed right into the farmhouse, wiping away all signs of the night's murders. Among the wreckage, rescue workers spot Brandon's symbol painted on a piece of the plane debris as they tend to him. Brandon is quietly enjoying a cookie, showing no remorse over the chaos he had caused. Later, Brandon appears in news reports covering different disasters around the world. An online conspiracy theorist discusses the existence of other superpowered beings like Brandon and warns the public to prepare before things get worse. And so, the story ends. Hope you enjoyed it. Do share your thoughts in the comments section, don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.